So I'm not sure we've done this before, but we are heading back to WCW for our worst booking entry this week. And oh my gosh, if you don't know, World Championship Wrestling in the year 2000 was absolutely amazing for all the wrong reasons. You also had commentators telling you that wrestling was a work and that you're an idiot for watching all this fake stuff, which is actually what we're going to talk about later. And if you want to know where it came from, it was mostly from the brain of Vince Russo. And I'm not here saying, oh, Vince Russo killed WCW, but I am saying he was part of a group of people that helped light the match. It ties right in because he was behind the New Blood Rising pay-per-view. And we've already said it, right? Some things are so bad they become good again. But after rewatching this, I think it just may be the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm not just referring to pro wrestling, I mean literally anything that has gone through my eyes and into the brain. This may be the bottom of the pile. It was on the 13th of August though, and by this point the WWF was way ahead in the ratings. So I suppose the best thing to do is just go match by match so I can explain to you why this is some of the worst booking ever. You can see how mad it's going to get straight away, because our first contest is a ladder match where the winner is going to get a gold record and a record contract. So I can only presume that WCW went, does anybody know how you get in the music industry? And somebody's hand went up and said, yeah, you have to climb a ladder. They're like, well, thank goodness for that. It ties right into one of our stipulations. You also had 3 Count taking on the Young Dragons, and you had another stipulation here, because one wasn't enough, and that is if 3 Count wouldn't have won, they never would be allowed to make music again. So once again, let's play this out in the quote-unquote real world. They walk into, I don't know, Sony Records, and the person behind the desk goes, sorry, you trio of nobodies, we know who you are, because we watched that pay-per-view, no record contract for you. And what if Shane Helms, who was part of that group, started singing in the shower? There's a lawyer just busting and goes, that sounds like you're making a tune for me. Don't make you throw you out the window. Tank Abbott, who had been brought in as a monster, was also like 3 Count's friend during this. And the promo he cut at the start, I mean, he basically just talks about his nipples. Well, he doesn't talk about his nipples, but there's a lot of nipples. So actually fair play to Tank, because he's clearly having a good time, and I can't fault that. And there is some trivia here. I mean, obviously the Young Dragons, were wearing masks, but under one of those hoods was none other than Jamie Noble. Now, a huge thing that we do have to throw into the water here as well is that unlike a lot of people at WCW in this time, all these 6 guys really gave a shib, so you can take the story and put it over there. In terms of their walk, my word, they give it everything. Thankfully for 3 Count as well, they did have Tank in their corner, who stops the Young Dragons from winning here, as he basically murks everyone, which allows Evan Courageous to climb that ladder and grab the contract and whatever else was up there, when Abbott just grabs these things and he runs off. So I'm like, is that allowed? I mean, possession is 9/10 of the law. I think this also means that he's Elton John now. Pretty sure that's how it works. When we cut to the back, and Ernest the Cat Miller is just yelling at the young, dirty, filthy animals, whatever the flub they were called. He also just accepts a bribe on camera, because the animals are always like, look, here's the 2 things we want. We want to be the special guest referees in the tag match later, and we also want a tag title shot. And if you do give us that, because Ernest was kind of the GM at the time, we will also help you in your contest. He just says yes. He says, that's perfectly fine. And did anybody from WCW management pop in and go, we know we're watching this right now, live on pay-per-view? No, they did not. Do you want to know who he was facing to? The Great Muta, who was basically treated like he was a nobody. Believe you me, he is not a nobody. So this is just incredible. I don't mean the ECW guy, but it's quite sad to see Muta here. This was when he was at the end of his career, and his knees basically didn't work. It's probably why the cat walks right up to him and donks him on the head with a microphone. But when the Great One applies an armbar, do you know what Miller does? Nothing. He doesn't even sell it. He basically looks at Muta like, is that all you've got? I'm like, it's an armbar, man. I know it's 2000 and MMA hasn't blown up properly, but come on. The cat is then choking the Great Muta with a camera cable, even though he is meant to be the good guy. But once again, we also saw him accept a bribe. So that's a bribe, it's attempted murder. This guy's terrible. Of course, eventually Muta does use the green mist, but that means nothing, so the filthy animals do live up to their promise. So out comes Tigra. She casts distractions, and then we get a bunch of chair shots, and Ernest the Cat Miller just wins. I mean, it's just so utterly pointless, and you get to the end of the match and realize nothing has changed in your life. And once again, we do go backstage, and Buff Bagwell is looking for his money. So I would say prepare yourself for this, but we are going to get right into it, because that's right. If you want to know where Mrs. Bagwell was, she had been kidnapped by Canyon. That's what he thought would progress his wrestling career. Why did I commit more crimes against people's family members? Actually, that's not true, because Canyon's big plan here was to have Judy Bagwell as his valet. So once again, that's what he thought was missing, an old lady. Buff wanted to win her back though, so of course it meant the only thing to do was have a pole match. I mean, I don't have a problem with that, do you? No. Let's just stand here and look off into the abyss. The other thing goes totally off the wall though, because Canyon is like, well, I couldn't find a pole big enough to suspend a human person, so instead, I'm just gonna put her on a forklift. And straight away, if you're a normal individual, you should ask, well, where the flub did you get the forklift from? Now, I need to make this clear too, in case you've never seen it. I am talking about Judy Bagwell, who was a real human being, a real person, being thrown up into the air on a forklift, and the winner would gain possession of Judy Bagwell, right? Don't try and find excuses. Don't try and allow this to make sense in your brain. That's actually what WCW had decided to do to make you buy a pay-per-view. There's more to this as well, because Canyon had recently turned heel on DDP. So it's just doing all of his moves when David Arquette turns up. I mean, why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't David Arquette turn up? I mean, I was half expecting it. No, I think he's a bad guy too, because he'd also turned on Diamond Dallas Page, so he tries to help Canyon here, but he totally fails, and Buff hits the blockbuster 1, 2, 3. And that made me scream out loud, and I was like, wait a minute, why is there a pin? I thought you had to go to the forklift and save your damn mother. That should never be a sentence either, and I'm mad it did just come out of my mouth. And of course, before we do move on, Canyon turns on David Arquette. He needs to get his heat back. So I have no words, which also includes the next segment, because we saw Lance Storm arriving late at the arena with a giant motorcade, and I was like, I'm sorry, I know the Lance Storm character, and in no universe, even a dumb one, would this guy ever be late. Around the same time, the commentators also tell us that Goldberg may not be here later, because he has been caught up in a car accident. And I audibly said out loud, how many angles do we need all at once? When we just get a mad tag team match after this, I mean, there is so much noise. Now, this is Chronic versus The Perfect Event versus Sean O'Haire and Mark Jindrak versus what has to be considered one of the worst teams of all time, at least when it comes to the name. Because indeed, it is Corporal Cajun and General Huge Erection. I'm not gonna say it the way WCW wants me to say it. They wanted to have a character that was referring to somebody's penis. Now, we already knew that the special guest referee for this was gonna be the Filthy Animals. So if you're now pondering to yourself, well, this must have been filled with shenanigans, you're totally right. Conan also joins commentary for this, and he runs everybody down to the point in real life he pissed a bunch of the wrestlers off. And then at one point, the Disco Inferno is the referee, but he's crap at his job, so Chavo Guerrero Jr. just takes over, and all you really need to know is eventually Chronic wins, but who the flood cares? When we get a Jeff Jarrett promo, and he just tells us that he's great and says slap nuts around about 1,000 times. Great. I don't even know how to get into what did happen after this, because it was Shane Douglas, who was now just calling himself the Franchise, who was now also accompanied to the ring by Tori Wilson, because he was taking on Billy Kidman, and in real life, Kidman used to be married to Tori. What? It's also a strap match, so we had another stipulation, but we'd thrown the rules away from this too, so no longer did you have to touch the four corners, you could just pin the guy, so what's the point of doing a strap match? If you want to know about the build too, one of the reasons the Franchise was so mad at Kidman is because Billy had stolen his Viagra, meaning now he couldn't have sex with Tori Wilson. Once again, look what WCW has reduced me to. Very upset man. No one ever mentions whether this is no DQ or not either, so of course Tori Wilson gets in there to cause a big old fuss. But Billy Kidman just goes and wins anyway. It's even worse because Vince Russo has no idea what good taste or a good babyface is. So after this, we actually act like Billy is going to beat up Tori until eventually Shane, the Franchise makes the save. So everything is just backwards, and then Big Vito is here too. I mean, why not? You may as well show up, nobody else cares. Booker T then pulls a Lance Storm because he's super late to the building as well. But apparently Jeff Jarrett didn't like this at all, so he beats the crap out of him, so there's a bit of jeopardy when it comes to our main event. But there's not. I'd already seen Judy Bagwell on a forklift. I mean, what else are you really gonna do? This pay-per-view then gets totally offensive because of course it did, because we basically get like a mud match between Miss Hancock's and Major Guns. I refuse to talk about this because it goes way too low, because it is just two people ripping their clothes off in some mud. And then afterwards, we get one of those stories that just makes you question what the hell wrestling was thinking. Because it is indeed a pregnancy angle when David Flair runs out, who apparently was dating Miss Hancock, and we start acting like maybe she was with child, and getting hit in the stomach was a bad idea. And of course, then the commentators start calling her Stacy Keibler to actually pretend like this is real. By this point, I was like, man, somebody just pushed me out the window. Vampiro, the Great Muta, and the Demon, and then being interviewed, and they're like, we want to destroy Sting later, and that made me sad too. Why the hell are we treating Sting like this? Tony Schiavone then has to look into the camera as well and say what happened to Stacy Keibler earlier was not part of the story. So once again, I was staring off into the abyss. That's twice I've done it during this show. I don't think that's a positive thing. Thankfully, after this, Sting does destroy the Demon in a match. This is the highlight of the damn show. Because it's Sting, damn it. He shouldn't be bogged down in stuff like this. Well, the truth of the matter is that if it was 2000 and you were in WCW, man, you were going down to hell. He was never going to get out there safe though, so of course Muta and Vampiro do attack him when Chronic makes the save. And once again, you tell me, I mean, we didn't even talk about why they are called Chronic. You know what, let's not worry about it. When we do actually get some ingenuity. What a world. So as Canadian Lance Storm had won the US title, he changed it from being called the United States Championship to the Canadian Championship. And yeah, like I say, I actually think that's pretty good. There's always a problem though, and we get two here, because he is fighting Mike Awesome, whose gimmick at the time is the Fat Chick Thriller. Or to break it right down, he just really likes overweight chicks. Don't get mad at me, that was the idea. We also have Jacques Rougeau as the special guest referee, because why wouldn't you want to in two different matches, when we learn that when it comes to the Canadian title, there's just a bunch of rules, which is you can just make them up whenever you want. So every single time Michael Awesome does win, Jacques goes, oh, I'm sorry. I know you think you did just get the 1, 2, 3, but we changed the rules, that doesn't count. The fact we did this to Lance Storm as well, who's like the most legitimate guy ever, is totally nuts. WCW had already pissed everybody off here because they had pretended the whole time that the special guest referee was going to be Bret Hart, and then you didn't get it. Then at the same time, you see a 3 count, then the match gets turned into a 5 count match. I just punched myself in the head. We go through about 79 of these until, of course, Rougeau just attacks Awesome, which allows Lance to be victorious. And I got mad again. It's Lance Storm. He's really talented. Just let him go. So this is proper 2 + 2 = potato, and go and listen to the fans at the end of this. They are just sitting on their hands, pondering to themselves why the hell they ever bought a ticket to begin with. We then maybe get the worst 5 minutes on the entire pay-per-view, because we are interviewing Kevin Nash, and he actually says, I don't know, man, if Bill Goldberg is going to be here, because the last I heard, he didn't want to do business, and he didn't want to follow the script. I mean, he didn't say script, but everybody else said script, so he may as well have said script. He then throws in that he's going to go over Scott Steiner anyway. That's why I just left. I just walked out of the room. I was like, I remember seeing this back in the day. I don't want to see it again. When Vampiro and the Great Muta win the tag titles. I don't care, man. Do you care anymore? Why was there so many tag team title matches on New Blood Rising? It has been 24 years and I still don't know. I will say that it's miles better than what followed this. It's when we are talking about rock bottom world championship wrestling moments. This has got to be in the top 10. Now, I'm sure you would have heard about this too because it was so ludicrous, but it was meant to be Kevin Nash versus Scott Steiner versus Bill Goldberg in a #1 contender match. But as Billy hadn't turned up at the arena, we just did Kev versus Scott. Eventually, Bill does get here though, and he runs to the ring. And this is when you get the real story of this contest, which once again is, are they going to stick to the script, or is somebody going to go business for themselves? And I'm not winding you up here. I am not exaggerating. This is what the commentary team keeps saying, which automatically tells you, well, this match may be a little bit real, but everything else you saw, well, it was just a pile of pants. It's also so damn confusing, because when Goldberg does arrive, he has a chair, and he's trying to attack Kevin Nash, because he believes that Nash is responsible for his car accident, and we're meant to think this is legitimate. But the car accident is also a storyline. I don't know what I'm meant to do with that. It also means that Goldberg is acting like he is hurt because of a fake car crash. And now my brain hurts. Somebody pull out my eyes. If only that was the proper down point, I think I'd be able to get over it. But eventually, Kevin goes to powerbomb Goldberg, who decides, I don't want to go up for your powerbomb, even though I meant to, and he leaves. And he bumps into Vince Russo on the way and he shouts at him, because this is supposed to be real and a shoot. Honestly, if I didn't stop watching WCW back in the day when this happened, more fool me. Poor Tony Schiavone then has to ponder whether or not Kevin Nash and Scott Steiner are going to start improvising. Mark Madden takes it down another notch. He was like, well, if I was Kev, I would have punched Goldberg right in the face to keep him in line. So they're still trying to convince you this has happened and nobody knows why. So his manager Majua then just punches Nash in the balls over and over again, but he may as well have a steel groin because he hits Scotty with the power bomb and he just wins. So every single thing that you just saw had no point whatsoever. And it was the main event after this, and I'm just going to tell you, if it wasn't my job to keep watching, I would have stopped. It is Jeff Jarrett versus Booker T for the World Championship though, and at least they try. I mean, I'm sure they were aware about how silly the rest of the card was. They were trying to do their best. You also get a bunch of referee bumps, because of course you do, and at one point Booker T does give Jeff Jarrett the bookend through the table, and that would have been a big spot if we hadn't seen a table break on essentially every other match in the show. You also get Jarrett accidentally on purpose chair shotting a nothing referee when Booker does get the bookend and he gets the 1, 2, 3. Listen, Booker T was a really good wrestler, as he was going to prove when a year later he jumped to the WWE/F. And he did pretty alright there. So yes, this is genuinely one of the worst pay-per-views I've ever seen. But you should watch it if you do want to be flabbergasted. But don't say I didn't warn you.